Okay, so he said we'll hear it. We'll hear it through this.
Check, check.
Can you hear yourself? Can you hear this? Okay, all right. Well, maybe just in case, we'll just have them here. How's that?
Okay, and then we're going to share our mics.
Okay, you and I.
Yep.
We'll just put these here just in
Yep,
case you
I'm
need
holding
it.
Mine.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, welcome everybody. So happy to be here with all of you this afternoon. My name is Lisa Jacobson, and I'm president of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. I'm honored to be moderating our panel today focused on transforming grid infrastructure, embracing technology and systems innovation. This is really top of mind for all of us. We are now seeing unprecedented load growth worldwide, requiring substantial investments to upgrade our energy delivery networks to the size and capacity needed for the long-term needs to align with climate targets. Meanwhile, a recent report from the International Energy Agency asserts that achieving the COP28 goal of tripling renewables and doubling the energy efficiency improvements of our economy by 2030 is feasible with the right enabling conditions, policies, and international cooperation. These challenges require that the private sector and governments from around the world optimizing existing grid infrastructure by scaling innovative technologies and system designs. In this, there is an important role for solutions like distributed energy resources, grid enhancing technologies, demand response programs, non-wires alternatives, and innovations like virtual power plants. We have an excellent panel to talk us through how these topics are impacting communities around the world. So I'd like to introduce them to you. First, to my left, we have Sandy Grace, Vice President of Policy and Regulatory Strategy for National Grid. To her left, we have Zaid Al-Ansari, Senior Regional Manager for the Middle East for EPRI. Next to Zaid, we have Paige Morris, Enterprise Director for Sustainability at Aspen Tech. And then down farthest to my left, we have Caroline Choi, Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Public Policy for Edison International. Before we go to our panel discussion, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. The Business Council for Sustainable Energy was formed out of this process. In the early 1990s, executives from the energy efficiency, natural gas, and renewable energy sectors in the United States understood that climate change and other global environmental issues were an imperative. They also knew that we had technologies available today that could help solve these challenges. And with the promise of public-private partnership, we would all move faster, more affordably, and have a secure and reliable energy system, not just for ourselves in North America, but for around the world. Things like supply-side and demand-side solutions that are available today need to be elevated in this process. And when I think about the grid modernization and grid transformation conversations, embedded in it are connecting and optimizing many existing technologies and offering new opportunities for efficiency, to all consumers. So when I think about things like virtual power plants or opportunities to enhance our grid, I think about a vision of really a full energy system approach, where we're seeing grid-connected buildings, we're seeing electric transportation, we're seeing optimized grid systems, so we're having two-way transfers of energy, and we're thinking about how that integrates with other important energy systems, like our natural gas system. So from the Council's perspective, this conversation today is spot on. We can't achieve any of those things if we don't transform the grid that we have, but most importantly, utilize the opportunities we have with grid technologies today. So what we'd like to do is focus in 3 areas, and then we're going to open it up to all of you for your questions. And I'm happy to say at this event, We have about an hour, so we should have plenty of time for discussion with the audience. So that's, for me, like as the moderator, a really important aspect of this. So we're going to spend about 10, 12 minutes on each topic, and the first topic we'll discuss is policy and partnerships. The second topic is technology solutions, and the third topic will be implementation challenges and opportunities. Before we go into our first topic, I'd love to invite the panelists to, there's a quick icebreaker here, rapid fire. Let's go down the line. Tell me what's excited you in all the conversations you've had. Most of you have been here for a week, and this topic of grid modernization and transformation is one that you've talked to a lot of different stakeholders about. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and what has excited you about those conversations. Sandy, please start first.
Thanks, Lisa, and I'm so happy to be here. So this is my second COP, and the thing that I've heard so much about here is around technology, the role of technology and innovation, because after the last COP where there was the doubling down and the tripling of renewables, it's clear that there's going to be a significant amount of infrastructure that needs to be built to enable the energy transition, and so technology plays a really, really important part in that. And when we think about like the scale of the investment that's required, thinking about cost effectiveness of technologies is really, really critical. So that's a lot. I know we're going to get into that in more detail, but that's been a recurring theme that I've heard so far.
Zaid.
Yeah. So from my end, when it comes to that, I would say the biggest impact I've seen, or the biggest takeaway I've seen, what excites me, is around the fact that me being in the Middle East, I always use EPRI as a way to look at what the rest of the world is doing. And I'm noticing that in this COP, it's a similar type of pattern. There's a lot of commonalities in terms of the same challenges, the same focus on technologies and how they're getting deployed. What excites me from this COP is the fact that there's a lot of rhetoric around, well, previous COPs is, what should we be doing? This one is being more focused on let's just get it done. So, and I love that, right? So can we start piloting some of these technologies at scale, seeing how they're going to be integrated into the bigger grid? So that does excite me. And I think some of that is down to the AI revolution, because we really need to step up our game. And I think seeing the hyperscalers react in a way that makes sense in terms of how they align that increase in load because of the data centers against what technologies are available to make the whole thing happen, their focus, their attention being involved in that is fantastic.
Thank you, Zaid. And want to come back to some of the regional work that you're doing. We mostly have a North American panel here, so hearing a little bit about what's going on in your region in the Middle East and other countries that EPRI's working on will be really helpful. Paige.
I'm Paige Morse from Aspen Technology. So the first thing I love is that the first two said technology, you're hearing a lot about that and it excites you. I love to hear that as a technology company. The reason why we come to COP is to display, discuss, and show how important technology is to make progress and to accelerate progress. That's really what we've been missing, is we've got to get moving a lot faster. So the fact you guys say technology is critical, I love that. It means it's working. We're beginning to have more conversation. And I think what's been exciting, particularly at this event, is the ongoing discussion about AI, because I do think it's really powerful to help in this space, and I don't want people to be afraid of it. We need to be part of it, and that's beginning to happen. You've got to be talking about it in open fora to be able to get comfortable on it, and we're getting to that point, so I'm very excited about that.
Great. Caroline, what excites you from week one?
Yeah, well, this is my fifth COP, and I think that it's really incredible to see the diversity of work that's happening in the climate space. One of the reasons that we come here is to certainly share what we're doing in California and elsewhere through our TRIO organization, but it's also to learn about what's happening in so many places leveraging technology. And yes, the AI is certainly the buzzword of, I think, this COP and maybe this year, 2024, but it's really also just the use of existing technology and speeding the deployment of existing technologies to get to the goals that we're all shooting for.
Terrific. Okay, so we're going to focus on the first topic area now, which is policy and partnerships. And I want to just kind of riff off each other a little bit. So I don't know who wants to hop in first, but all right, Sandy, here you go.
Yeah, Lisa, I love talking about policy because we've also been talking about that a lot here at this COP. So one of the things that I think about, because we talked about technology, so there's this stage of technology where you're trying out the technology, but in terms of scaling it and getting it to be cost competitive, that's where the policy is really, really critical. And so we need enabling policies to leverage technology, try them out, and then scale them so that they're cost-effective solutions to the grid. We know, as I was saying earlier, we're going to have to build a tremendous amount of electric grid infrastructure, but affordability is a real concern. So you know, in terms of thinking about like what's cost-effective, deploying technology could help us avoid building infrastructure in certain places where it's appropriate. So, for example, like if you could, you know, have dynamic line ratings, or you could use different kinds of conductors that make the existing infrastructure much more efficient. Those are really, really important tools that are emerging as tools in the toolbox in addition to building traditional infrastructure. But policy is critical to scaling those kinds of technologies, and frameworks in which, regulatory frameworks in which our regulators say, we want you to try this technology on your system and see that it works and then replicate it where it's appropriate, all really, really critical.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add to that, starting with some of the partnerships, because I think partnerships are really key to helping share lessons learned. EPRI is a great example of that. The membership of EPRI, both investor-owned utilities, public utilities, co-ops, working together to do the R&D and then the deployment of those technologies at pilot scale to see how they're working on various systems, because all of our systems are quite different. And I think it's sometimes people don't realize that. They look at the wires and like, oh, you just go from one city to the next, but actually you can go from a 12 kV system, which is like our distribution standard, to a 4 kV system right next door, right? And so those technology ideas and solutions really have to be tested across various distribution systems to make sure that they're actually going to work at scale when you talk about that. So I think important partnerships like EPRI, like other nonprofit organizations that we pull together to try and test EV technologies and that sort of thing. And I think on the policy side, I'll just add to what Sandy said, as an example, IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, both of those such important policies that help push technology forward at a pace that, we're seeing growth now on our system. We had projected growth sort of at the end of this current rate case, 2027, 2028. And our projection now in 2024 over the next decade is 35% higher than it was just 2 years ago. And some of that is really driven by the bipartisan infrastructure law and IRA putting out money so that people can go electric a little bit faster than they might have planned otherwise. And so a third of that growth that we're seeing is due to transportation electrification. About a third of that growth in Southern California, Edison service area, is due to new home builds. And in California, our new home builds are almost all electric. And so we're seeing growth there. And then about a third is in that commercial industrial space, of which some portion of that is data centers. We don't have the growth in data centers that some of our colleagues have in Virginia and Georgia, but we are still seeing it in California as well. And so across those, a 35% growth increase just in 2 years. And I think a lot of that's driven by policy, trying to push folks moving that electrification acceleration over the last few years.
Anyone else want to hop in? Go for it.
Just 2 cents, I guess, but I mean, yeah, okay. In Saudi Arabia, they just achieved 1,048 cents per kilowatt hour. It's a world record in terms of how cheap PV is getting. It's quite impressive. And the fact, it is clear that, sometimes going along can get you there very fast, But I think the decarbonization journey is a long journey, and doing it together can get you very far, And being collaborative, thank you for bringing up EPRI. It is a medium for collaboration, bringing together different utilities to share that knowledge. Achieving a low cost for PV is fantastic, right? But at the end of the day, how resilient is that PV against various elements, whether it's extreme weather or the way the grid is designed? And that only can be resolved if you're bringing in people together. So the need for partnership is becoming even more I would say, critical, especially in these times.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're better than me at this, so yeah, appreciate that. So EPRI has several initiatives going on, whether it's the EV to scale to understand how to bring electrification into the transportation industry, or climate readiness. Climate readiness is really bringing together the learnings of various institutes from around the world to understand what extreme weather could mean for the power sector, and understanding probabilistically what extreme weather would look like in the next few years, several decades. And the more you can understand that pattern probabilistically in terms of how often can you have extreme wind or rainstorms and so on, allows you to then circle back and see what your designs you're making right now in terms of investment for massive, many billions of dollars, let's say, in terms of building up that grid. Is it resilient towards those potential extreme weather events? So yeah, appreciate that. Climate Ready is a very good example of bringing lots of different entities together, looking at the power sector and with one voice, and understanding what challenges the power sector will have and figuring out how to resolve those.
Terrific. I don't know, Paige, do you want to add on policy and partnership? No? Okay. Well, let's move to our next topic then. So it will be technology. I know, Paige, you probably want to talk about that. Yeah. So please kick us off. There you go.
Sure. So let me give you background for a second. So we're a software company, and it's fundamental to use software to balance the grid right now. When you have these intermittent sources, when you're trying to rapidly expand, you've got, and you also back and forth flow, it's very challenging to do that in a manual way. You need software to step in and make sure that the system is overall balanced. And this is a huge area to help increase capacity, but then also give you the flexibility that you need. Because right now, I think as we all talk about this, there are sections where you've got grid constraint. This is classic, in my view, in a transition where you've got, say, rapid growth of renewables and the grid's not quite ready, and so you're trying to do this kind of balance across the total system as well. Well, if you apply a control to your system to manage the overall grid, you can also control it. How do I describe this? You can pull back on renewables a little bit until the grid is ready to take it. But when that means when the grid's ready to go, so are you. You've got the renewables online, everything's ready to move. So software is also helping this expansion stage as we try to work with others and resolve that. So it's really a critical piece that needs to be part of all the systems. And the way we're adapting, certainly we have a lot of business in the US working with National Grid on both sides of the Atlantic, but also we're doing significant work right now in India. That's a lot of solar is coming on there, and so we're helping to balance there. We're already huge in Spain, as everyone knows, there's very big renewables there. But one area of real excitement too is there's lots of new activity on geothermal. So we've been involved in the Calpine project for years, but now there's geothermal popping up in obviously select places all over the world. And literally just this week we're now being used in Iceland. I mean, the volcano island, their geothermal is fundamental, but it's being used to balance that system as well. So technology is really critical when you've got this first mix of electricities and generation capability, and then also this kind of growth at irregular stages that you need to work through. So I think that's a key issue right now.
Anyone else want to hop in on that one?
I'm okay for now. Yeah. So yeah, with regards to technology and the way they play, I think, like I said earlier, in terms of, I think piloting is the most critical part of the efforts, right? So, earlier this year, our CEO mentioned, let's get 10. So basically, how can we look at 10 different, early technology solutions and start piloting them? But really, the only way to get the piloting to happen effectively is by collaborating. So can we look at Look, the tradition with the utilities is that it's very difficult to get them to start being the first ones to adopt a technology or try it out. They're always nth of a kind, right? But doing it together is quite an important, I think it's going to be an important part of that journey. Can we start piloting technologies like LDES, like different parts
What is LDES for someone who's...
long duration energy storage. And there's various different kinds of LDES, right? There's things that are related to gravity, so storing the potential energy of gravity. And so you basically deploy it when you need. Hydro storage is probably the pumped hydro storage is probably the best one I could think of. It's basically having water stored higher up in an elevated area, and then when you need the power, you release it and you have it run through turbines, and you capture the energy that results from that. So, but trying that out, and not every region can adopt their type of LDES, right? Each region requires something else, but in each region there's a set of utilities, set of power entities that could trial that technology, get together, and really get on with it, figuring out what really makes sense for them, so that curtailment of solar, which is a big issue, right, can be reduced, and you can put it through those types of energy storage technologies. AI has obviously given us a lot of potential opportunities for figuring out how to use the generative model for training to apply it to the power sector, to allow your ability to optimize your generation, the way the grid is stabilized against weather patterns, against demand load. And those are technologies, again, that are being brought up, but our ability, our courage to trial them and be able to bring them up to deploy them at scale is really the next step in what we're doing right now. Like I said earlier, let's get on with it is really I would say the key phrase here.
No, and let's get on with it. I mean, thinking about the Dubai outcome, where there was this big emphasis on technology, where they articulated, and we had 120 countries sign on to the tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency improvements by 2030, really a rallying call. And there were other technologies too that were part of that initiative. And then here at this COP, speaking of the topic of the day, grids and energy storage, there was another initiative put forward. And I think what's interesting about that is it creates these race to the top, these North Star ambitious targets that countries can say, how am I going to fit that into my national energy plan? How am I going to fit that into my next round of nationally determined contributions? So I know at the Business Council, that's a big focus for us over the next couple of years, is really working on a country and community level and helping them understand everything that you're all describing in terms of what technologies can do today, and then how to make that work for them given their particular needs and resources on the ground. It sounds like, please hop on in.
I was just going to add also that I think for the technology piece, and it ties to the policy, is the funding. So particularly for the next generation technologies to test, when you go first, it's going to be more expensive. And California is sort of an example of that, because we've gone first in many ways, and you see that reflected to a certain degree in the rates that customers pay, because we were the first to do large-scale renewable portfolio standards, and so therefore early contracts where the prices were much higher. Those are starting to roll off, but when you look at the prices that we paid back in the early 2000s compared to what many utilities are paying today, our customers really helped drive that technology forward to a place where it is now really omnipresent in so many places. And it's that same thing as we think about the next generation of technologies, whether it's small modular reactors, next-gen nuclear, next-gen geothermal. The cost of that, how do customers, utility customers, and ultimately bear that price? So how do we make that affordable? And government policy can really be a factor in that, particularly for the first 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of demonstrations of those technologies. I think that's really critical. I think also as we think about this demand, because demand is here already, and some utilities are struggling with meeting that demand because it's coming at such a pace and at such a scale, because commercial load from electrification, for example, transportation electrification of commercial vehicles is a much higher demand than passenger vehicles. And so utilizing technology today that can help meet that demand while we make the grid investments that will make more permanent, reliable resource for that demand. So whether that's large mobile substations that we put on trucks that we can move around our 50,000 square mile service area to help meet the demand in the near term while we make the grid investments for the longer term. I think utilizing managed charging, so that's something that we're working with a number of the EVSCs, the charging stations, where they can, instead of having 100% power all the time, at certain times of the day or certain times of the day during certain times of the year, utilizing managed charging so that it won't be 100%, it'll be 80% at certain times of the day. And so they're just utilizing technology, some of that's software, some of that's hardware, to ensure that we can meet the customers' demands for today as we plan and make the more permanent grid investments for the future.
Yeah, Sandy, I'd love to ask you a little bit about that. Are you using the same types of innovations? And you also mentioned grid enhancing technologies. Can you explain that to people? I'm not sure if everyone would know what you're speaking to.
So I'm not the engineer here. So the way I think about it is like, if you have I was trying to explain to my kids, like, for example, like if you have like a water pipe and you're trying to move the water through, like if you had to move more water through, you could expand, like if it was a flexible pipe, you could move more water through. And in a way, like when you think about like certain technologies around line ratings and that having them not be static but be dynamic, that's like moving more electrons through and increasing capacity of moving electrons much more efficiently. Sensors as well, like on the system, so that's really, really key. So you have an understanding of, the efficiency of the system is really, really also key. But the thing that really strikes me, maybe because you said let's get on with it, it's that at the bottom line there it says now it's time to get back to now it's time to get to business. I think when I think about like the technology piece, there's new technologies, but there's existing ways to moderate demand, which is around things like energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is one of the most important critical pieces of moderating demand. The other ways that we've talked about, like using storage for like managing flexibility, also really key, but that's newer. It's newer in the sense that like the technology is still evolving and it hasn't been deployed at scale. So when we think about solutions to optimize the grid that we will build for the future, that we are building for the future, there's solutions that have to be, very diverse in how we think about it. So we have, tools like energy efficiency that we've used very successfully to date. We've got rate designs and programs around managed charging of vehicles, so price signals to customers. That's a tool that's going to be even more important over time. And then you've got like the actual nuts and bolts of the technology, so the sensors, the storage, the systems that, Paige is and her Aspen Tech are developing to really be really smart about like the system. Those are all really critical. Like you can't, I just say there's not one that's like more important than the other. It has to fit the purpose. And the purpose is trying to build a grid that's smarter, it's cleaner, and it's cost effective.
Can I bring up one thing just to support this as well? Microgrids. This is a critical new growth area, and we can't skip it. It fits in this space. I was going to bring it up under EVs because there's an example where you might do it. But we work with a lot of industrial customers as well, and maybe they're in isolated locations. Reliability is critical. So a microgrid gives them that reliability that they need, control of their system, and yet it's very well managed with the generation capability around. So that I think is a critical new development, and it's getting better and better. Microgrids have kind of been, yes.
Prices dropping and dropping. Yeah.
Less expensive, she's saying. That's critical, yes, because then it's accessible to more businesses and encourages them to electrify. Because again, we work with a lot of companies that your backup is diesel. Well, we don't want that. We'd rather have a microgrid and then we're green, we're electrifying. This makes a lot more sense. So I think that aspect of microgrids particularly is critical for penetration of renewables, and that's what we're after here. So,
Zaid, go ahead.
I just want to build up on what you said earlier regarding the VPP. Out of all the technologies that are being introduced right now, I think VPP is probably the one that excites me the most. We talk about penetration of renewables. Virtual power plants. I'm sorry, I was going to explain that. So, we talk about penetration of renewables, their impact on the grid, and the tools required to maintain system flexibility in that grid. The way the operators work, the way the planners work is brilliant, and we've gone into depth on that. But the distribution aspect of that power sector has always been a passive. Let's just make sure that the customer gets what they need at the end of the day. But I think in the next few years, you're going to see a huge demand. In some regions of the world, are already thinking of that. Of course, California, but others are just kind of grappling with the idea right now that the power of the customer to feel a sense of community in terms of how they contribute back into that grid, making sure that their ability to have a sense of almost like an arbitrage on comfort, that they're okay with reducing their AC from 23 degrees to 24 degrees. It has a huge benefit back to the grid, but on them, they may not even notice it. Turning off your fridge during the daytime when you're not there at home, right? Turning off your heater, I guess, water heater during the night when you're not really showering or using it. All of that adds up, especially in an aggregate way, massively. That's why they call it the virtual power plant. Some of us don't really like the name because it sounds like digital twin. It doesn't make sense. But the idea of aggregating all those potential opportunities and you're really bringing a massive benefit back to the grid is something that excites me.
Say, can I go back to when we talked about the technology? When I was talking about the price signals, so for virtual power plants, one of the most important thing is like, what's the compensation for that virtual power plant? Meaning, like when utilities want to deploy it, and those aggregated resources, one of the things you got to think about is, that's a grid resource. So how do we value it? That's going to be a policy thing that we're going to continue to have to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. So EPRI has been categorizing the impact of those different types of resources so that at least we have a consistent way of understanding their impact. So again, aggregated ways, the benefit can be seen automatically.
Well, you've already kind of hopped into the third area before we open it up to questions. So think about some questions. We'd love to hear from you, which is implementation, right? How do we, get moving, as you said? What are the challenges and, what are some success stories too? Like, I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to hop in.
I mean, some of the challenges are the speed of deployment, certainly. And one that I've heard throughout this week has been siting and permitting. That the pace of siting and permitting technology, especially infrastructure, so steel in the ground, is taking too long. And that's a number of factors from the federal level, state level, local level. But in any case, it's a need to reform those processes so that we can put steel in the ground much faster than we are currently doing it. And that's partly because the size of the challenge. When we look ahead to 2045, our analysis shows that the pace of investment and activity in the grid has to grow tremendously, 4 times at the transmission level, 10 times at the distribution level. So in order to do that and hit the goal, you've got to get faster. And so process improvements in that siting and permitting space are really critical. We've talked about a couple things like a shot clock on appeals, for example, so that voices need to be heard in that siting and permitting process, but there needs to be a point in time where we move forward. The resources, agencies really need to have adequate resources to be able to process all the applications that are coming into them at this time, and so really having that adequate time frame for that is another. Just a couple of things, in terms of challenges. I think there are successes. I look at, again, you go to the infrastructure law and the funding that's flowing through formula grants to the states and then being pushed out for infrastructure like charging stations is incredible. And California is leveraging that to help build that, to get more infrastructure out there. Today, California actually has, according to our energy chair, David Hochschild, more electric charge ports than gasoline nozzles. So, and that's important to have that charging infrastructure in place for people to go electric, to feel comfortable buying an electric vehicle or leasing an electric vehicle, and that it can meet their needs and that they can find a charging station wherever they need it. So I really give a lot of credit to California for really making those investments and having the scale of charging network that we have already in the state and continue to build out. And that, I think that is one reason why you see 25% of new car sales in California being electric compared to about 9.5% in the rest of the country. So just one example.
Caroline talked about putting steel in the ground. I would say even before that happens, the ability to plan in a proactive way is really incredibly critical. So in the state of Massachusetts, for example, the policymakers have recognized that, if we want to change the way we heat our homes or with transportation electrification, the regulators have asked the utilities to say, this is the investment we need to make over the next 5 years to electrify heating and of homes and thinking about how you electrify transportation. These are the electric system investments. So that's an example of proactive planning and action. Similarly, at the wholesale transmission level, FERC is looking at a longer time horizon with respect to transmission planning. That's really, really, really critical. So, and to have different scenarios for how you plan, also critical. After the planning, or alongside the planning, is the need to have a regulatory framework that allows for utilities to invest on a long-term, forward-looking basis in anticipation of that load and demand that is going to come. A lot of the frameworks in the United States are still under a historic test year, meaning regime, and what that means is you build your regulatory rate cases based on your historic level of spend, which is candidly, for the growth that we need in the investment going forward, it doesn't work. And so the regulatory framework needs to evolve as well as the planning framework.
And I'll just add on that, we don't have historic test years. We actually do have 4 test years in California. I think one of the things, though, that we have to work on is we forecast the demand, and then what we have to sort of have an idea, pretty certain idea of where the customers are, because they've contacted us, they've told us what their demand is, and so we're putting that into our forecast. One of the things that we put in this current rate case that is pending at the PUC is proactive grid build out, where we actually don't specifically have customers who have come to us, but because of where the state is headed with electrification and fleet rules and other programs at the state, we see growth in commercial vehicle electrification from the Port of Long Beach out to our warehouses east of there, about 30-something miles. So it's regularly 65-mile round trip between the port and these warehouses. And so we've proposed proactive grid investment called Transportation Electrification Grid Readiness, TIGR, to make more investments in this space, knowing that electrification is coming, and it may not happen in the 4-year window of this current rate case, but it's going to be happening, and we need to get ahead of that electrification, because by the time we hear from a customer, sometimes we cannot meet that demand in the time frame that the customer wants it. And so this proactive grid build out is our way of reaching the grid readiness that we know our customers are expecting as they go electric at scale. So that's just another. And then on planning, I'll just add that I agree with you that planning has to also evolve. One of the things that we've done at the company is we used to plan around issues, wildfire being one. After 17, 18 catastrophic wildfires, we put together a team to plan around wildfire risk mitigation, looking at the third of the service area that's in high fire risk area, and making a plan around those circuits. And then we had a group that was focused in on infrastructure replacement, so looking at the asset age and making a plan around all of our assets across the 50,000 square miles. And then we had a team looking at growth and figuring out the plan for those circuits that we're experiencing or that our customers had come to us and had a plan for additional load. And what we've done is centralized planning across the 50,000 square mile service area, and instead said, okay, let's plan for all of it. So we're going to hit that circuit only one time for wildfire, for infrastructure replacement, for grid readiness. And so it's minimizing crew roles. It's planning one project across all the different needs. And it's also an improvement to customer experience because you're only taking an outage the one time versus multiple times over the course of a year or two. And it's also good for the cities because it may only disrupt traffic the one time and that sort of thing. So we're trying to, by centralizing the planning, improve the experience to customers, our experience with our cities and counties, as well as minimizing costs to customers ultimately from our crews going out multiple times.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Paige, did you have anything you wanted to add on this topic, on implementation issues?
You raise a really good point about giving confidence to your customers that things will be ready, because you need to anticipate. And I think that balancing it truthfully, it brings back to the partnership piece. We need to communicate well with each other about what our needs are. And then during this mismatch period, as we transition, we need to share what our capabilities and move forward across the value chain. I just think that's a critical concept during the energy transition. So maybe I'll just emphasize that point. But yeah, so technology needs to be in there, but so we also need to understand from you what your needs are. So, yeah.
Well, I'd like to see if we have any questions from the audience. And I have a few more, so we can come back here if not. But we do have a microphone, and if anyone has a question, we'd love it if you could introduce yourself and ask your question. I see one in the front. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you all for being here today. So awesome. My question is kind of just something that you briefly touched on, which is kind of educating your customers on more sustainable uses. And I'm wondering how you do that and what you see as the role of the private sector in educating customers to reduce their energy use. Thank you.
I'm sure, Sandy, you can touch on this too. Utilities certainly have a number of programs to educate their customers around ways to save electricity. So energy efficiency programs that actually encourage them to invest in technologies that will reduce their energy bill. For lower income customers, we will even provide those devices for free. And so they can, we have a heat pump adoption program, for example. So for low-income customers, we will replace their gas heater with a heat pump. We have an EV incentive program for pre-owned vehicles. So we give $1,000 to customers to go into an electric vehicle. For income qualified customers, it's a $4,000 incentive for a pre-owned vehicle. But a lot of education around their energy usage. We also partner with I can't remember the name of the company, but on the bill it actually shows how you're doing against your neighbors, and so to encourage them to use less electricity. And they can call our we have energy advisors that help with ways that they can reduce their electric bill, from changing out their lighting, which is the most, I think, the easiest way to reduce your bill, to switch to LED lighting, but also to change out appliances. And then we also have a online store that people can go to and order appliances that are energy efficient.
Caroline covered the importance of customer education. It's absolutely critical. But this is kind of where I think we maybe transition to talking a little bit about the importance of partnerships, because when you're thinking about what it's going to take to effectuate an energy transition, you need not only utilities, but like researchers, and then you need also technology providers. But the role of the customer is very, very critical. Like the customer behavior in terms of this way. Sorry. Yeah, the role of the customer is really critical, right? So, for example, Zaid mentioned like the virtual power plant. Those are actions that customers will take, and utilities will aggregate those values. But in order for customers to understand the role that how they can participate in the energy transition, there's a lot of education that needs to be undertaken to be so that it's really efficient and it makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll just add to get to customers across our service area because we have one of the most diverse customer bases in the country. We do leverage nonprofit partners that will pay to go out into the communities to promote our programs in language so that customers are hearing it not just in English but in a language that they are familiar with, and then can sign up through our nonprofit partners instead of directly from the company. Oftentimes, utilities can be seen, especially from those who are not from the United States, as an arm of the government, because in many countries the utility is an arm of the government. And so if you are in the country and you don't have documentation, there are times when there's a lot of concern about interacting with the utility. And so working with nonprofit partners, having them speak in language that our customers are familiar with, and then not being directly tied to the utility are some ways that we can activate our customers in a way that's more comfortable for them.
I'll just add this from a different perspective. We spoke about most of the perspective we're hearing here are from really US based. So from a Middle East base, the rate that we pay for power there is flat, right? So in terms of pricing incentives, really don't exist. So what they've done, the utilities there, is really over communicate about your behavior as a consumer of their power sector. So you have an app on your mobile phone. You could track daily what you're spending in terms of power, in terms of water, and that kind of influences you to understand where things are not trending the way you want, right, as a consumer. So it really pushes that over communication in terms of your behavior as a consumer. So I know, for example, when I'm out or it's winter in my home in Dubai, I know my power is going to be around 30% less, maybe more, than if it was summer, right? So I kind of start thinking about what should I turn off before I leave home, kind of thing. And it's not because I'm going to get just a low bill or kind of use appliances at the right time. It's more about the overall impact that you're having, because you've got a kind of an almost live app about how you're behaving as a consumer when it comes to the power sector, when it comes to the utility. So I would say there's a lot of areas. I also have a home, and also go to London a lot, and I know they don't have that. They just get a monthly bill, and you're not really sure where how you spend that power, if there's a leak at your home and so on. But in Dubai, I was quite impressed with the fact that it's more live in terms of how you track your behavior.
Yep. Thanks for sharing all that. Any other questions? I see two, so we got three. So let me check time. You head over there. Yeah, we got plenty of time. Thank you.
Who else had questions? Okay, come to you next.
Hi, you touched on consumer behavior, which is extremely important, but with the new DAC plants and the new nuclear, which need huge electrification, and utilities really resisting kind of the grid adapters to provide more solar and wind into the grid. How do you really kind of bridge that, which is going to be kind of the next generation of electricity use?
So you were asking.
Would you mind repeating your question? It was really hard to hear.
Okay, so the question is when we need to generate massive amounts of electricity, how do we create flexibility in the system to get it from point A to point B? So less about a customer-focused question, more a question about system-wide large electric load. Is that okay? I'm going to go back there first. We'll come back. Does anyone have an answer about flexibility on the grid? Here.
That's a great question. We do a lot in California to promote demand management. So not just energy efficiency, but demand response. And we have a program in California statewide. It's called Flex Alert. So what we see generally in California is the peak is from 4 to 9 p.m. And there are times during the year, generally in the summer, where because of high demand, the independent system operator who runs our transmission grid will call a flex alert. And if the state calls a flex alert, then the utilities put out an alert to customers to reduce their demand at the time of 4 to 9. We also offer programs to customers that allow us to turn off devices in that time frame. So we have an air conditioning program, for example. If customers sign up for this air conditioning program that allows us to turn off their air conditioning sometime between 4 and 9 p.m., they get a bill credit of $25. So that's how we work to some of the programs that we have to deal with large-scale demand needs. We had one episode was it just last year, where the system was tight, and actually the governor sent out a text, and we saw an immediate 2,000 megawatt drop in demand because he sent out a text and went out to all Californians. So that's obviously maybe a trigger you pull once, but it really does work. And actually, since we had some rotating outages in 2020, we also have added a tremendous amount of battery energy storage. So in 2020, SCE, Southern California Edison, had 240 megawatts of battery energy storage. Today, we have 2.2 gigawatts of battery energy storage. So in 4 years, we've added a tremendous amount, and we have over 8 gigawatts under contract. So, in total, between the 2.2, so we're on our way to over 8 gigawatts. So in 2024, in fact, when we had a west-wide heat wave, for the first time since I've been in California that I can remember, we actually exported power during the heat wave to states in the West. And it was really due to the fact that we had added so much battery energy storage in the state of California, 3,500% increase in 4 years in the whole state. So.
Right here? Yeah, we're taking right here.
Hi there, hi. My name is Victoria Burrows. I work for Compass VC. We're an early stage investor in startups and technologies that can help with some of the challenges that you've mentioned. And you've mentioned some things like dynamic line rating, some of the energy storage, virtual power plant technologies that are available today, which is brilliant. Caroline, you mentioned about siting and permitting. That sounds like a massive barrier and is only going to increase across the world. So is there anything in terms of how can technology help you with that specific challenge? And thinking ahead to 2030, 2040, as these challenges increase, is there any, do you have a wish for a particular technology that if was available and could be deployed that would actually help with some of those challenges, or something that you're seeing at the moment that's very nascent but you're getting excited about, the sorts of things that we should be looking to invest in to help you achieve your goals?
It's a great question. I think there are a lot of things that are possible. So for instance, if you have standardized design, is that something that can speed the process? So if you're utilizing standard templates for certain substations, 3 designs, then you're sort of wave through because you've got that pre-approval. But in terms of technology, I think one, for example, that I heard about actually at COP last year was utilizing AI around the environmental impact reports. When you think about development in an area, it's not like the utility is the only one that's doing a project in an area, and yet every applicant has to do the same environmental impact report. Is there a way to leverage technology that makes those environmental impact reports public, and so you could leverage one that's already recently been done so that you don't have to repeat it, sending it to the same agencies that just looked at it. And so that was one where it was a technology company that was looking at putting these reports out publicly so that applicants could see it and leverage those so they would know, oh, there's wetlands here, or oh, there's endangered species here. And so they could go ahead and in their application already be addressing what is known environmental concerns in an area. So that's just one example.
That's a great question. I wish I had a crystal ball for the new technologies on the horizon, but I will say that we have a venture arm called National Grid Partners that is actively looking at new technologies and how we can deploy them. And they're at the startup phase as well. So happy to put you in touch with those folks there, because there's a lot of, if you think about where we were 20 years ago, cell phones, they're ubiquitous now, right? So that was an inflection point in technologies. AI another inflection point in terms of like the way not only driving demand going forward, but how do we leverage AI to get smarter about how we leverage existing infrastructure. That's all key. So there's a lot to, I mean, it's a very exciting time because it does feel like another inflection point that we're in. And so I'm happy to put you in touch with our National Grid partners.
Sorry, one more example is using AI for scenario planning. Today, our scenario planning takes maybe a couple weeks to run each scenario, but leveraging AI, when we've talked to these AI companies, they run scenarios in seconds. And so if we could leverage AI, run multiple scenarios that quickly, then we can improve our plans, our infrastructure plans. Again, going back to like this climate readiness, having those scenarios, but having that done so much more quickly than it could be done in the past is just another example of leveraging technology for the future.
I'll just add this really quick. There is, inflection points and a kind of the effort around the next wave of technology advancement is great. But there's also a need to figure out how to make sure it works reliably. So when it comes to VPP, a lot of focus needs to be around how to make sure it all works, right? So there is an effort with EPRI, I think Krakenflex in the UK, Project Mercury, if you look it up, it's basically trying to understand how to standardize a protocol for connecting those appliance devices in a way that's consistent all over the world. So look it up, try to get involved in it. It's a fantastic, if we can drive that and make that a success, it'll be a fantastic way for us to be more efficient in terms of how to get those appliances to behave in a way that helps the overall power system.
We have 2 questions here in the back. We're going to take the questions back to back and let you all respond, and then I'll go up here. I know I have a question here and a question there, so we'll start with you.
Well, thank you so much. I think this has been brilliant. I've learned so much within these past 30 minutes. And my name is Mark Ba. I'm from Ghana Grid Company. And I wish I had heard these stuffs maybe about a month ago, because we've just embarked on a transmission grid expansion project, how to plan for it. But this is good information for me, and especially on the use of smartphones in communicating with customers. This is brilliant. And I think I just picked some ideas from here. But my main question is, I think last week there was a lot of talk about climate financing. And I just want to know from any of you, because investing in these costs money, how do we take advantage of climate financing to carry out some of these innovations that you're talking about? Thank you.
Okay, one more question over here.
Hi, thank you again. This has been an amazing panel. I'm Shannon Roberts from EY, and my quick question was about how you all are maybe working with some of the demand response type products. Like, are utilities crossing over into the consumer product or appliances to really start to use more things like batteries and use of AI to understand how products, like you described in a virtual power plant, but how products are best integrating with the grid and how the grid's changing to minimize the demand on the grid?
Great, so we have 2 questions, one on climate finance and the role of investment, and then one on demand response and how we are working with partners. So go ahead.
So I really can't answer the question on climate finance, because as an investor-owned utility, we go to the market, get capital from the market, and then once we put the capital in the ground, we can start to recover that cost from our customers. So that's how we finance our infrastructure investments in California. So it's a little bit different model, I think, than maybe what you have in Ghana. For demand response, I think one of the things that we're looking at, we, in our rate case, have pre-staged our application for next generation smart meters. And so we're currently in the process of figuring out what attributes that next generation of smart meter has to have. What we're hearing from companies is the ability to actually differentiate between the loads in the house, so you know what appliance is actually creating the largest load demands. And then we already utilize virtual power plants in California, but certainly the ability to expand on those to be able to offer specific programs to cover customers, whether that's home, VPP that's around a home, or to be able to speak to specific appliances in the home that can provide the greatest demand response at a certain time. So we're sort of in the early stages of what we might be proposing to the commission. We said it was going to be an application that we'd file, I don't know, either late 2025 or late 2026, but those are the kinds of things that we're looking at in this next generation of smart meter.
Any other comments from the panel on finance or demand response? Otherwise, we have 2 questions here. Okay.
Thank you, all the speakers, for your fantastic discussion. I'm very glad to see we have such granular discussions because broadly saying, I think we are talking about the green energy transitions, and that is very important, not only matter to the United States, but also globally. So I'm Sabrina. I'm the CEO of the startups leading the AI and the forecasting tools to support the energy transition. So I'm very happy to in this panel. My question would be between China and the US, because the new presidencies and with a lot of uncertainties. And how do you think that within your business or within your state, is there any impact to that part? And also broadly saying, how do you see that the collaborations between China, US, or broadly globally, any impact in next 3-5 years? Thank you.
So this question is on the role of the political dynamic in the United States and how it might change the relationship with China and collaborating with other regions. I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
Well, I mean, I would just take it back to the COP and this process. I mean, it's been moves the whole process when the United States and China can partner together. And there have been some very important meetings even this year between the governments of China and the United States, so that we kind of look to that as a leadership moment, as a responsibility moment, and that gives confidence to the rest of the world that this is the issue that we all need to organize around.
And I might take some host organization privileges and piggyback on that question for you, Paige. You mentioned that Aspen Tech operates in many different countries globally. So as we've heard about AI and different regional partners kind of in the audience, is there, what is your sense of sort of what technologies you're seeing are more successful in different regions, and kind of how does Aspen Tech think about that? And then we'll take a question up here after.
Yeah, that's, I like how you position that. It is surprising sometimes how you can penetrate further in one region that you didn't expect that. I think to bring up your region, Middle East is very focused towards AI right now. That's a hot topic. They really want to develop the capability there. And so that region, I think, is becoming quickly more comfortable with AI than some areas are. And I will say, I'll comment on the China thing just real quick too. We're part of the Energy Cooperation Partnership, which was set up by the Obama administration, and it's about clean energy technology exchange between the US and China. We're particularly active in that for hydrogen and carbon capture, because these are areas that we're all still learning and is relevant to the grid as well. And so I do support Lisa's comments completely that we need to cooperate well and hope we can continue to do that. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, the penetration of technologies, it is about working together so we all get comfortable. So, yeah, thanks.
And I'll just add, I think on the climate side, just as Lisa said, I think we can have differences in certain areas and still continue to push forward on climate. And I'll just also add that California does have a strong partnership with China. There's a California-Chinese collaborative. And so I think for California, I know that they will continue to work together, particularly around climate and clean air.
Hi everyone, I'm Wolfgang Blau. I'm a managing partner with the Brunswick Group, which is a specialist in climate communications, amongst other things. And I have a question, which is a broad question about perceptions of grids, because in so many countries, the perception of the grid is that it is this legacy, former or current public utility, while it really already is a major hotbed of innovation on AI, for instance. It is what really is the backbone of a country's economic competitiveness. It is also a hugely important employer, green employer, in a world where in so many other sectors the shift to net zero technologies means mass unemployment, such as in the steel industry. And so I wonder, are there examples of good grid narratives that you are aware of that position grids as not this legacy utility that many consumers can't even differentiate from their power companies, and then put in one pot when it comes to price rises? So my question to you are there grid organizations that you're aware of with narratives, if we use that word, that you think are worth studying and taking a look at?
Yeah, I'll just mention, at least in the Middle East, I can't differentiate and say one utility is better than the other because I'm objective and unbiased as EPRI, but I'll say this from my personal observations, it's a fantastic enabler when it comes to developing workforce, right? Especially in a young country like, let's say, UAE, where when I walk into the utilities there, half of the engineers are female. Where else would you see the opportunity where you can, use that in an industry where you can use that to kind of really push on gender diversity, on technical STEM fields like the utility industry? So it's really quite, empowering. And the same in Qatar and the same in Oman, where you see young and old, different types of genders really working together in the sort of, industry where it welcomes all, right? So yeah, for me, it's quite eye-opening.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of people fundamentally want energy to be reliable. They want it to be safe, and they want it to be affordable. The challenge is like understanding how, the value chain works to the delivery, all the way down to the delivery. And it is a collective challenge that we all have to think about, is how do you explain it in a way that's, you're a communicator by profession, explain to it that's simple and it meets people where they are. And I think that's really the bottom line. The grid is an enabler, right? So it is, by itself, the value is it's enabling people to live their lives the way that they want to live their lives going forward.
Okay, we're going to take one last audience question here, and then we'll have Lisa do a rapid-fire wrap-up. So here.
Hello, my name is Bahaj. I'm from the University of Southampton in the UK. Just wanted to give you a little bit of warning first about AI. It's only good enough as a matter of what you put in it. And if you're thinking about an infrastructure, like a grid infrastructure, you really got to be very careful. You just have the experience of Tesla having AI in their car, self-driving car. But my question is really not related to AI, right? My question is really related to the title of the session, which is Transforming Grid Infrastructure. And I particularly want to talk to you about the legacy that my colleague there already mentioned there. We have a legacy of infrastructure that has no investment for such a long time, especially at the distribution network. And you got a lot, the National Grid, for example, they have fantastic work around the transmission network, 400 kilovolts and so forth. But at the lower level, the delivery at cities level, not in the Middle East, you're doing very well in the Middle East. At the city level, all the cities, majority of the cities in the UK, for example, are curtailed. There's not enough power for them to grow. So the government's strategy for growth is actually curtailed by the grid, right? Yet there's nothing happening at the DNO level. So I just wonder, what advice will you give to the people who are working at the DNO level to unlock that blockage for energy?
I think if I could just paraphrase what I understood your question to be is how do we encourage investment at the distribution level? Is that right? Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is policy driven, right? So I mentioned in Massachusetts, for example, the statute which has Massachusetts like to reach net zero goals, and then the state has set an expectation that utilities plan to those state goals and to provide like what their investment plan looks like over the next 5 years to meet the electrification of heat or transportation. And then we submit that to the regulator to approve. And once the regulators approve that, the next question is like, is the investment mechanism available? So we talked a little bit about the regulatory dynamic, making sure that the framework for how the investment is recovered is as anticipatory as the way we do planning. So those are two key components that I would say in our jurisdictions in the U.S. are starting to really evolve to adapt to meet the climate goals of the states.
I'll just add for Southern California Edison, we were doing quite a bit of investment in replacing our 4 kV infrastructure to either 12 or 16 kV. And we continue to do that, although now we're really looking at, given the pace of electrification and the scale of electrification that we expect by 2045, is 16 kV enough? So we're actually thinking about actually building above that 33 kV and having 33 kV be our standard for new distribution, given again the level of electrification that we're anticipating in California through so many of the state policies. And I think building that into our plans. But I would also add that there's a lot of investment in the distribution system in terms of situational awareness. So the switches that we're putting in so that we can not just turn off the whole circuit if we need to for a fire emergency, but be able to sectionalize the circuit. We're also putting on technology for situational awareness, so these cameras and weather stations, particularly in a high fire risk area, so that we're aware of what's happening across that area in terms of fire risk and the potential for, again, having to proactively turn off power if we see a high risk situation arising. So I think there has been investment in the distribution grid, and we anticipate, as I said, a significantly more at a pace that's much faster, 10 times the pace that we've had traditionally, given the level of load that we see coming through the distribution level system.
Sure, Paige, go ahead.
Just real quick, on situational wellness, that's very much software driven too, to kind of look at your system and figure out where you need to adapt. But on the AI point, I just want to say one thing, maybe a teachable moment. When you use AI, there's two critical ways you look at it, open loop and closed loop. Open loop means AI does the analysis, but it goes back to a human and they make a better decision because of the analysis that's been done. And that's profound. And that's most of the applications that people are looking at. Help make me make a better decision, better business choice. Closed loop is when you just let it be off and running. We're not ready for that in most systems. It can do it for simple decision making, what your refrigerator cycles through, what your dishwasher does. You don't need to intervene on that. But these more critical decisions, open loop. A human's in there, they're just making a better decision because they're more informed. So, well.
No, that's great. So we're at basically the end.
Really quick one on AI. It's always a topic, right? I mean, from all the panels and all the conferences that have been very enthusiastic about AI, I really see there are going to be 2 roles a human being can play in this AI revolution. A knowledge curator and a knowledge generator. Those who generate original knowledge, researchers, academics, and so on, that feed into that model to make it more sophisticated. And those who are curator knowledge. And to your point, as long as those people are curating knowledge to make sure it's applicable, whatever you get out of the AI, it's going to be applicable to your needs, make you more productive, make you more effective in your work. As long as that's being fed back, and whether that solution that the AI is generating feeds back into the quality, I think the AI is going to continue to be an implicit part of what we see in the next 10 years, how we operate and perform. So.
Okay, so lightning round close. What will you take back with you to share with your colleagues after your experience at COP and the discussions you've had on grid infrastructure and transformation? Sandy.
I was going to quote Zaid and said, let's get going.
There you go.
Oh, well, in my case, it's just realizing, every so often we come across these opportunities where that disrupt the way we work, disrupt our way of norm. And some people see it as a threat. Definitely not in the case of AI, don't see it that way. See it as a way to motivate innovation in areas that we really have been a little bit more complacent. So the fact that hyperscalers like Microsoft or others are investing in SMRs today is quite an exciting time for nuclear, right? So I look forward to seeing how far that goes.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's this balance of optimism and pessimism. I think we have both sides still going on. Optimism, loads of renewables is coming, it's great in this context, but now we're hitting a bottleneck with the grid that we need to figure out. And I think for all of us, I'm glad we're making progress, but lots more work to be done.
I guess I would say there's been obviously a lot of conversation this week, given the election results last week. And from what I guess I would take back is that there's still so much momentum to go forward, and we just have to keep moving forward.
Well, terrific. Thank you all. Excellent conversation, and thanks to all of our guests for joining us. Have a terrific day. Bye.